India just became the fourth largest economy in the world, surpassing Japan with a GDP of over $4 trillion. Media outlets are celebrating, politicians are cheering, and on paper this seems like a moment of glory, proof that India is rising, powerful, and destined to lead the global economy. But here's the uncomfortable truth. This celebration may be hiding a very dangerous trap. Because behind this milestone lies a silent threat that has crushed countries like Brazil, South Africa, and Malaysia, nations that once looked like the next big thing, and then stalled permanently. So while everyone is clapping, maybe we should be asking one brutal question. Is India truly rising, or walking straight into a dead end? There's a strange paradox in economics that sounds almost fictional until it starts happening to your country. It's called the middle income trap. And it goes like this. A poor country starts growing fast. Factories pop up, roads get built, jobs flood in, foreign investors are excited, the world applauds, people rise out of poverty, a new middle class emerges, wages go up, kids go to school, GDP soars, everything looks perfect until it doesn't. Because then, the very things that powered the early growth stop working. Labour becomes too expensive to compete with poorer nations, but the country still doesn't have enough innovation or high-value products to compete with richer nations. So you're stuck. Too rich to be cheap, too poor to be powerful. That's the trap. You can't move backward, but you're not going forward either. Your factories lose contracts to countries with cheaper workers. Your graduates can't find jobs because your education system never taught them to invent, only to memorize. Your GDP stops rising, your economy flatlines, and your people, the ones who thought they were climbing, now realize they've hit a ceiling and no one told them it was there. This isn't theory, it's history. Brazil, once the darling of emerging markets, now stuck with sluggish growth and rising debt. South Africa, touted as a post-apartheid success story, now battling unemployment rate that's over 30%. Malaysia, celebrated for rapid growth in the 80s and 90s, now struggling with underemployment and brain drain. All three were promised prosperity. All three got caught in the same trap. So why does it happen? Because countries assume that what worked before will keep working forever. They assume cheap labour will always be enough. That assembling other people's products is the same as creating your own. That building roads is the same as building ideas. But here's the harsh truth. You can't build a rich country on someone else's blueprint. At some point, you have to design your own. The middle income trap doesn't kill countries overnight. It's not a crash, it's a quiet suffocation. Wages rise, costs rise, but innovation doesn't. And eventually, the growth engine stalls. What's terrifying is how invisible it can be. People are still working, still studying, still voting, still hoping, but year after year the numbers flatten, progress slows, disillusion sets in, and when that happens, the country stops dreaming. That's the real danger, not just economic stagnation, but ambition collapse. And today, India is walking that razor-thin edge. It's at the exact inflection point where Brazil once was, where Malaysia once stood, where South Africa paused and never pushed through. India's GDP is booming. Its global rank is rising. But the real question is, will it keep climbing? Or is this the highest step we ever reach? Because make no mistake, the middle income trap is not just a risk, it's a mirror. And right now, India needs to decide, will it break the cycle or become just another case study in what could have been? Here's what they don't tell you about the $4 trillion celebration. It's not one India, it's three. The top 10%, around 120 million people, live like Germans. They work global jobs, invest in international stocks, and brunch with avocado toast. The middle 300 million hustle like Bangladesh, surviving but always one hospital bill away from slipping into poverty. And the bottom billion, yes, 1 billion people, live like sub-Saharan Africa. No running water, no reliable electricity, no internet, no job security. The average per capita income is $2,400, but averages are deceptive, because for the majority, life is brutally hard. While one India flies to Bali for corporate offsites, the other walks 5 kilometers just to fetch clean water. One India builds unicorn startups, the other can't find a working toilet, and both Indias exist not just in the same country but often on the same street. So before we light fireworks over GDP stats, we should ask, is this real growth or just unequal expansion? Back in the 1980s, Malaysia looked like the future. It opened up its economy, welcomed foreign companies, built roads, bridges and factories. Literacy rose to 96%. Intel, Sony and AMD all came rushing in. Malaysia became Asia's factory floor. Wages rose, GDP boomed, the world took notice. But here's what nobody saw coming. As wages increased, companies started looking for cheaper alternatives. Vietnam was cheaper, Indonesia even more so. So what did those foreign companies do? They packed up and left. Malaysia had built an economy based on being cheap, not being better. And when someone cheaper showed up, it collapsed. Worse, their education system produced degrees, but not innovation. Students graduated, but had nowhere to go. 1 in 5 Malaysian graduates is now unemployed or working jobs unrelated to their degrees. Engineers delivering food, MBAs cold calling for insurance. It didn't crash overnight, it simply stopped moving. And today, Malaysia's growth curve is flatlining. While Malaysia stalled, another country with no resources, no money, and a war-ravaged past was quietly rewriting its destiny: South Korea. In the 1960s, Korea was poorer than India. It relied on international aid to survive, but it had something most nations don't: a long-term plan. One generation would work, the next would study, the third would invent. First came the workers. Factory labourers who exported textiles, steel and ships. Then came the engineers, trained in science, tech and manufacturing. Then came the innovators, entrepreneurs, researchers and brand builders. They didn't just assemble products, they designed them, they improved them, they owned the patents. Samsung started by assembling Japanese TVs. By the 1990s, they were designing their own screens and chipsets. Today, they supply displays to Apple's iPhones and dominate global tech. Hyundai once made clunky, cheap cars. Now they build luxury EVs and invest in flying taxis. It's no longer a company, it's a system. And the result? South Korea's GDP per capita rose from $150 to $33,000 in just a few decades. Not magic, not luck, strategy. India right now is at the same point Malaysia was 30 years ago, and it's walking into 3 massive traps unless it course corrects. Trap 1. The education illusion. We produce millions of graduates every year, but only 45% have usable skills. We build coaching centres instead of campuses. We train students to pass exams, not to think, invent or build. In 2018, 93,000 people applied for 62 peon jobs in Uttar Pradesh, including 3,700 PhDs. That's not just underemployment, that's a collapse of purpose. Trap 2. Innovation deficit. India spends only 0.7% of its GDP on R&D. South Korea spends 5.2%. China, nearly 2.6%. Even Germany doubles us. India files fewer than 100,000 patents per year. Korea, over 150,000. The US, 280,000. China, over 600,000. We dream of becoming the next Samsung, but we're still struggling with basic literacy. Trap 3. The manufacturing myth. Remember Make in India? It was supposed to turn India into the factory of the world, but after 10 years, manufacturing's share of GDP remains stuck around 15%. No factories, no jobs, no export engine, so we have cheap labour but no productivity. And as we've already seen, cheap labour doesn't last. So what's the way out? Can India still turn the tide? Yes, but only if it follows what we call the 3I framework: investment, infusion, innovation. 1. Investment. Build infrastructure, reform land laws, make it easy to do business, just like Korea did in the 60s, just like Malaysia almost did. 2. Infusion. Bring in technology, reverse engineer, learn from the best. Samsung licensed Japanese tech in the 1980s, then built better versions. The government even subsidized copying because every economy starts by learning before leading. 3. Innovation. At some point, copying isn't enough. You need to create. Korea shifted from adoption to invention, investing in R&D, higher education, and STEM. And it wasn't a handful of brands, it was an ecosystem. That's the difference. India has some innovators, but Korea made innovation the default. India is standing at a crossroads. One path leads to global power, the other to economic mediocrity. We can become the next South Korea or repeat the fall of Malaysia. The $4 trillion GDP is not the finish line, it's the starting gun. The race now is for innovation, equality, and long-term strategy. Real patriotism isn't clapping at headlines. It's doing the hard work of building systems, solving problems, and fixing what doesn't work. So the next time someone says India is now richer than Japan, ask them, are we also smarter, fairer, more innovative? Because GDP alone is just a number. And a number without a vision is just a statistic waiting to be forgotten. Let's make sure we're remembered for more than that.